Welcome to a brand new Corn Nation Overreaction. We are live on a Sunday night on YouTube, Facebook, and X. I'm your host, Greg Mahachko, and I'm in the wrong spot. Let me make a few adjustments here. There we go. That's the way it's supposed to be. I'm in the. I just throw out questions to the experts here. The guy.
We lost Greg.
Yeah.
Lost Greg just like Dylan Raiola lost the football.
Looks he's trying to come back.
Man, Greg is just he's fighting for his life right now, guys. We're just gonna sit back and how was your Thanksgiving, Jake?
It was good, man. It was family, right? So how about you?
Good. I mean, it's not like we weren't in the same place on Thanksgiving night, you know.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Like the second I asked that, I was like, man, I'm a moron.
So smoked turkey came out great. So
yeah. Turkey got smokier lately. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
Other than that, guys, I don't really know what to say right now, except Aaron Keene brought up Greg's struggle bus Mahachko, and I think that's a pretty accurate statement. And then let's just kind of go through some comments as we welcome people in here. Oh, no, we're back.
Hi. This is what happens when I try to just move my laptop a little bit. Is the USB port for the camera somehow got dislodged and it dropped me out. So, hi.
Welcome back.
How was your guys' Thanksgiving? Sounds like it was very similar.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only difference might have been I had a Thanksgiving to go to in the afternoon with my family. Katie and me had to go to that one. Then we were at Jake's.
Yep.
That sounds like it.
Yeah. It was good. I saw a comment. I think it was Pit Snipe Husker. It's my dad and I did the cooking. So I manned the smoker and Dad kind of did all the leg work. So
what's the preferred? Smoking the turkey or deep frying the turkey?
I think smoked turkey's the way to go.
I agree.
The homeowners insurance probably will thank you for
both are superior to baked turkey. I don't think there's going to be many people arguing that, but I do prefer smoked turkey.
Speaking of turkey, Tiger Shark Diver says that Greg, aka I, didn't recover from that wild turkey. Yeah, I don't know. You guys, I don't know if you were aware, but on Wednesday night when we did the 5 Heart podcast, we did turkey before turkey, which was me ended up being almost a double shot of wild turkey at the outset of the show. So
that sounds interesting.
Been doing turkey before turkey for about a dozen years, and to mix results. So we'll just keep it at that. Mr. Rostovsky says smoked turkey, but Charles Hullett says deep fried. And Pitt says, love y'all cooking and smoking, fellas. And Smoking Beetle B says, smoked turkey the best. My oldest sister's first victim, ex-husband, made the best smoked turkey.
Fred, is your oldest sister Janice Soprano?
Fred also says, you know who wasn't a good cook? Scott Frost. He never let his meat rest.
That's good.
Let's see. Marianne Roberts says, I should have known when Colt McCoy was a broadcast for us in Iowa, it wasn't going to be good.
Yeah, I don't know what would have been worse, having to listen to that guy announce a game live or being in Kinnick with, we'll get into it later. I won't lead with the juiciest part of the show.
Well, let's lead. I don't know where we're going to lead. I don't know where we're going to go, but
Greg, you're the colonel. Command the whole thing.
All right. Friday night, Black Friday, 6:30 kickoff, Kinnick Stadium, Nebraska and Iowa. Nebraska was trying to get, just make sure that guarantee themselves a winning record for the season after account for the bowl game. Iowa, I don't want to say that they limped in, but they didn't have a dominant record. I mean, it's Iowa. And the fireworks started before the game. When Nebraska took the field a couple hours before kickoff and they were stopped from go into midfield, which they've done for a couple of years now as a team for a quick prayer. The security said, no, you can't be on the Hawkeye, which is dumb. I don't think Nebraska's ever tore up an opponent's logo or anything like that. They've never been outright disrespectful. And then the coin toss happened, and a little disrespectful.
I don't think anybody in the stadium knew really what was going on. I didn't hear anything about it until after the game was over and I was back at the hotel, but I don't have any problem with it. I think it's child's play compared to what went on in college football yesterday. And I think when it's a team that has done nothing but just disrespect you and go beyond the pale of, sportsmanship and competition, but like waving goodbye and blowing kisses at a team, telling them to have fun, stay home for the holidays. Screw it. They hate us. It's time we match their intensity. They hate that team and fan base hates everything about us. I experienced it firsthand on Friday night in Iowa City. I've been to probably 9 or 10 road games in my life. That was the worst treatment from any fan base, bar none, that I've ever received. And I think that they're sanctimonious, just like their head coach. I think that they're basically a poverty program that's perfected the art of not going out and winning, but just waiting for you to lose the game. And on one hand, yeah, they're fundamentally sound and well coached, but the other hand, they drag you down into a rock fight. And at some point, Nebraska just needs to kick the shit out of Iowa to the point that we leave no doubt. And if we don't shake hands with them, who gives a shit?
Yeah, we need to put that poverty joke of a program back where it belongs. I mean, then you got to deal with I mean, you don't have to, but I expose myself to it because I'm a glutton for punishment, but dealing with their fans on social media. This is the only fan base that'll brag about a win when they got their asses kicked all day in every facet of the game except for special teams again. Which we'll get into all that later, but this would be like if a boxer was getting their ass kicked for 9 rounds, and then the guy who was kicking their ass, their opponent, like came out from the corner, tore his ACL, and got a 10 count and couldn't get up, so it was technically a knockout. That's what their fans celebrate. They're the only fan base in the country that does that.
And to piggyback off that, I didn't hear a single word of shit talking before the game and during the game. And then once that happened, it was fuck Nebraska, fuck Big Red, taunts, a lot of physical contact from their fans, grabbing at people. I had one fan grab the back of my neck, as he was walking by, and him and I exchanged some words. It's just ridiculous. I've never encountered anything like that before. So for them to position themselves as these arbiters of what's classy and right, and these darlings of the Midwest and college football, they're full of shit as a program. And I think it's time. Nebraska needs a Darth Vader. We need a villain. The United States had the Soviet Union for 50 years, and it's time, that we return the favor towards them.
Somewhere in here, I have just the picture for that hoss. You may recognize it from years back. Let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. Yes. I do. I have it. Now it's got to load. It's this close to being cool and timing things out right. So there you go. I don't know if you remember that from. Gosh, that might be before. I think I looked up.
That might be Husker locker days, man.
No. I remember this is 2016. This was the very beginning of 5 Heart.
Speaking of 2016, that was the first year I went to Iowa City, and that was when we were pretty heavy favorites. I want to say we were maybe 10, 12-point favorites. And we got beat by 30. Akram Wadley ran wild on us. And Iowa fans weren't that bad that time. I was there in 22. The Trey Palmer's down there somewhere game. They weren't bad at all. And so it started to kind of be like, hate Iowa. Hate them more than Mizzou, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma combined. But at the same time, Iowa City's not the worst place to go see a game. It's not a bad city at all. But I've come back from Iowa City with a fresh, rejuvenated, and seething hatred for everything regarding that program, state, and fan base. So I think that Nebraska needs to really start bringing it.
Some of the comments here, you guys aren't going to appreciate this first one, but That's never stopped me from riling you up. Mr. Rostovsky says they have been the worst college fans I've visited and behind only Chiefs fans in any sport.
A lot of similarities between them and the Chiefs fan base. I think I said that in a not so nice way of describing it to Jake in a text message.
Yeah.
Gargamel agrees with Jake, says they've been bad all over other podcasts. Well, if they show up here tonight, we know what's going to happen. Let's see. Living in Omaha, David Matney, the official realtor of the 5 Heart Podcast, says, where do you think that came from? Was the handshake team generated, or did it come from Rule? I want to interject my thought here. I don't think Matt Rule said, hey, go out and stiff them. I think that was the players who kind of had enough, but I'm curious on your guys' thoughts.
I think that Rule definitely used it last year as a motivational ploy for these guys, because he mentioned it on Monday's press conference where he said, these are guys that waved goodbye to you and told you to have fun staying at home for the holidays last year. So I think that was definitely a motivational tactic. And I just want to say, some of the Iowa fans in the comments, do you hate Nebraska more than you love your own program? Because I wouldn't waste a single second on an Iowa podcast, man.
That's the thing. Like, I have no time to hate watch. Like, there's enough Nebraska content that I could be watching that I just don't have the time for. I'm not going to go out of my way to watch an opposing team's, show or anything like that. And it's just not how I'm, wired.
The only thing I hate watch is Yellowstone, because it's such a terribly written show. And I've never seen it by all accounts, but I don't.
Let's see here. There's another one that I wanted to throw up. Pitt with an interesting question says, or there is the theory that we could have the confidence to rise above it as far as, whatever pregame Matt Rule gets stopped on his morning or his afternoon jog or whatever lap. He said we could rise above it. I think there is a certain mentality of, let's go out there, let's shake their hands and smile, knowing that we're about to kick their teeth down their throat. That's not how it played out on Friday, both at the coin toss or, I think as we get into the nuts and bolts of the game, I think we'll find that Nebraska held up their end of the bargain, especially defensively. It was just, too many other miscues, mistakes, and missed opportunities that reason why they were on the downside of the tilt on Black Friday. But I don't disagree. I think there is the way, when you exude the confidence, you can go out there and you can, even if you're smiling in front of gritted teeth, like, kick your fucking ass, I think there's a way to do that. But again, our captains chose a different route.
The thing is that if you're going to make a move like that, you have to set yourself up for riling up your opponent. You have to deal. If you're a guy who all week talks trash about your opponent and they're going low and they're chopping at your knees, you have to be prepared to deal with the consequences. And we fired, obviously, Jay Higgins, linebacker for Iowa, captain in midfield. And he ran all the way across the field, made a point to shake Rule's hand, and what I would consider a real show of disrespect there, which, I would have liked to seen Jamari Butler see Jay Higgins do that or some of the other guys. Mm-hmm. I don't think he'd be as pretty right now as he was the other night if that would have happened. Fuck him too.
I think it's easy to point to the handshake antics after the fact because we lost in yet another walk-off fashion. But we dominated this team for outside of 3 plays. They backed it up. I mean, what else do you really want them to do except for Dylan holding the ball a little higher and having some urgency in the pocket in a 2-minute go down and score situation? John Bullock, executing a form tackle instead of going high, trying to strip the ball. And, Vincent Shavers actually realizing that Isaiah Garcia Castaneda didn't touch the punt. 3 plays. That's all it took. We pissed away one of the greatest coaching performances at Nebraska in recent memory. When I rewatched it last night, great game plan by Holgorsen, great game plan by White. And Iowa was playing with a 3rd-string quarterback who 3 weeks ago was on the scout team, but we did what we were supposed to do against them. We gave up 5 first downs. So if anyone's upset that we pulled off the antics with the handshake and didn't back it up, we backed it up. I mean, like, at some point you take your shot, you take your shot and you see what happens. But I don't think there's anything that this team should be ashamed of from Friday.
Fred says, and I think this might put the nail in the handshake coffin here, says, serious comment. At first I was mad about the coin toss, no handshake. Then I saw everything. Now I hate Iowa. Fuck them in their 6 teeth and offensive plays. I think he means and their 6 offensive plays. So,
yeah. 6 teeth too.
Well, I think let's talk about the game before we kind of get into, Haas, your experience, because I know you said that this is not the shining example of Iowa fandom that you've experienced in the past. But let's talk about, you talk about the coaching strategies that were implemented by Dana Holgorsen and Tony White. And I think we first need to go to what really was accomplished on defense. And somewhere here, I've got to scroll up a little bit to find it. But there was a ridiculous defensive stat, or it's offensive stat when you think of what Nebraska defensively was able to accomplish against, their, third string quarterback. But it's a little bit more scrolling. We'll get there eventually. We're finally to Saturday morning. But best friend of the show, Josh, who I don't believe is here with us tonight, shared, and I don't have this to share visually, because why would I be that prepared? Nebraska had 334 total yards to Iowa's 164. We had 190 passing yards to their 115. I think bulk of those coming on that screen pass touchdown to Caleb Johnson. We had 144 rushing yards to their 49. We had 20 first downs to their 5. We held Iowa 0 for 10 on third down and 9 punts. They had 1 penalty for 15 yards. We were penalized 4 times for 20 yards. But the big one that we talk about, 2 fumbles lost. And those are, like I said, it's not a situation, and I'm not trying to, I guess, be much of an apologist per se. But what I will say is it is Iowa's modus operandi not to beat you, but to wait for you to beat yourself.
Yeah, sometimes, and I will say, I think it's kind of a Ric Flair way to, back their way into a win. But there is something that's somewhat honorable about the fact that they play good situational football, if you want to call it that. Sometimes you just wait for your opponent to lose the game. And we've done that. We've given Iowa that opportunity way too many times over the past 6 more like a decade. I was going to say 6 or 7 years. But you look at things like Kirk Ferentz knowing when to call a timeout to slow down a drive when we were deep inside the red zone, and then we don't gain any yards after that. John Holm misses a field goal because of the snap. It's like Rule said, it's like coaching against Bill Belichick. I'll give Kirk Ferentz his due. He's a solid football coach. Just the fact that he doesn't want to go beyond that is why I just can't muster any respect for that program. They just want to win in the most ugly fashion possible, drag people in to rock fights, and set the sport of football back 50 years. And then, not to mention, I can't respect somebody that's had such nepotistic hires over the course of their career as well.
Jake?
Yeah, I mean, they're an 8-win football team. Nobody does it better than Iowa. Nobody wins football games with 130 total yards better than they do. I mean, it's pretty impressive, and you got to give them their due. I mean, you watch them play. If you didn't know their record, you'd be like, oh man, that's a 3-win football team. Yet they're going to a good bowl again, where they'll get their ass kicked like they do every year, but they're going to another good bowl. They're an 8-win team, and Kirk Ferentz, they don't beat themselves. They, got to give them credit for that.
I'm going to give Iowa the highest compliment that I can muster. All right. They are Nebraska when Nebraska was coached by Bo Pelini.
I wouldn't even insult Bo Pelini that way.
But I mean,
No,
but
actually, they play way more disciplined football than we did under Pelini.
I don't disagree with that. But as far as the ceiling, they're never going to rise beyond where they're at. Just like we were. That's the comparison. We were never going to.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
and I agree. I don't think Iowa's ever going to go beyond that until Ferentz is gone. I think that for us, we should want Ferentz to be there as long as possible because they'll always be this. And, even though we haven't beat them, we've only beat them once since 2014, 2015. It's right there for the taking. You just have to make more plays. I think Iowa, if they continued, being well prepared and well coached, but they had, a different philosophy in place, would kind of be a little bit of a scary thing to have to deal with. That's the nicest thing I'll ever say about Iowa right there.
Yeah. They're the most overachieving team in the country by far. I mean,
and what, Kirk's 2 wins away, I think, from the Big Ten all-time win record.
Through attrition alone, but
but I mean that all that is longevity of mediocrity.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'll give Iowa's administration credit. They were patient with him when he went 4-8 in 2012 and let him come back from that. If he's at a program where football is a little bit more of a rich tradition, they fire him for going 4-8. But yeah, I mean, he's kind of he's of the Pelini ilk. I agree, Greg. I was trying to think of something a little bit more insightful to say, but after a long weekend of driving across Iowa, that my mind's a little fried.
Well, let's check in on the comments here. Linda Wilkins is here and tells me to man up. Linda has 3 fingers of scotch neat every night at about 4 o'clock.
Linda sounds cool.
Linda, I'm usually still working at 4 o'clock. I don't have that schedule.
Come on, Greg, you let working stop you from having 3 fingers of scotch, man?
Be a real man.
Yeah, Minnie's here. Shout out, Minnie shouting out to Linda. And then Justin says, "Oh dang, Minnie's talking shit. It's serious." I didn't see that in the comments. Let me scroll up real quick. I don't know what Clay Ed says, but Clay Ed said, or Minnie responding to Clay said, "You must like mediocrity." So,
isn't it mediocrity?
I'm not here to. It's Sunday night. I don't grammar police on Sunday nights.
Fair enough.
It's the only night that I take off from grammar policing. Let's see. Quick one here. Iowa. Fred says Iowa Ric Flaired their way to another theoretical win. Gutless cowards. You're like KSU without results. So brave. Fred likes a good old school wrestling reference. And speaking of old school, Tiger Shark Diver says this is a cool hat, old schoolio, and I gotta thank. Make the point. Nope, that way. I gotta thank this guy for this old school hat. I do like this hat, and I don't wear a lot of hats. I've got this hat. I've got this hat. I want this hat tonight. So, all right. Let's see. Let's keep talking about Iowa fans. Kenny with a good one here. Iowa fans have Husker envy. They know they don't have titles, so they get their thrills out of beating Nebraska.
Iowa fans love their moldy starter jackets and dirty aviators, trying to emulate Hayden Fry, too.
Let's talk about that because we had a really nice conversation this weekend. I think it was yesterday. And and you were getting very particular on some of your Iowa fan hate. And brother, let me just say, I'm here for it. Moldy starter jackets, dusty aviators, and there's a comment that I have starred right now about us living in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, they live in the 80s, emulating a football coach that, they claim was better than Tom Osborne, but not even sure if he won a Rose Bowl. And if he did, it was before my time. So they lost the 85 Rose Bowl to UCLA 45-28, it looks like. Has Iowa ever won a Rose Bowl? In 1959, they destroyed Cal Berkeley 38-12. I think they claimed that national championship, and that's in an era before the 2-platoon system ever existed. So it's not really the modern era. So, we're a lot alike, evidently. We both like to emulate football coaches that have been retired for over a quarter of a century. We like, 100% polyester jackets. So, maybe it's they say proximity breeds contempt. It's the familiarity breeds contempt between the two. We just don't lead the nation in methamphetamine manufactured per capita.
And manufactured, now I say manufactured positivity, but I mean, there's a whole lot about Iowa that just is, from is this heaven? No, it's Iowa. We're going to get into it. I've got thoughts that we're going to rile and piss some people off tonight. But James Boardman says, I heard Kinnick Stadium didn't have ice on Friday. The guy who knows the recipe called in sick.
Evidently, they don't know how to flush toilets either. They were all overflowing with urine in the bathroom between 104 and 105.
Let's see. I'm going to start that one, Rostovsky. That's a good one. Minnie says, I got to say, I was so pissed when I thought we were going to overtime. We didn't win in overtime, or we don't win in overtime yet.
Really think we should have played for overtime instead of trying to go down and get a score. In those conditions, and against a team like Iowa, a defense like Iowa that's not going to have any coverage busts, and that's a testament to how Phil Parker has that defense prepared. I just didn't feel like we were going to be able to get in position there. I thought that we should just ran it, kneeled it. If we had to punt it away with a few seconds left, you do it. Trust your defense, get to overtime. And I felt like our defense could have kept them out of the end zone, even if we scored first.
Mr. Matney with it. I mean, we talk about the 3 bad plays, but David says at some point you need to score enough points that 3 botch plays aren't enough to beat you.
I agree, David. I agree. And, that's the weird thing. Jake and I were talking yesterday. For as many long sustained drives we had, we just couldn't finish in that game. There were instances like on that first drive of ours, we drive all the way inside the 10 and Raiola throws a little shallow crossing route to Fedoni on 3rd and 4 and it stopped short of the sticks. If he stays a little bit more patient, Ja'Cory Barney pops open late in the end zone on the corner route. And then there was another opportunity to hit Emmett Johnson on the flat route too, where we were really trying to target Iowa's backside corner. Jake,
is that the same play where we hit Banks coming over on 3rd and short? We got stopped 4th and 1.
That was another one. That was on a drive concept, little dig with a shallow underneath of it, and Emmett Johnson's wide ass open.
Emmett doesn't. Our receivers, I'll say, they never really try to show Dylan up. It doesn't happen. But you could see on the TV cut, Emmett kind of throws his hands up like, oh, my God. Because he was right in Dylan's field. All Dylan had to do was pop it over the top. And I'm not blaming Dylan Raiola for this loss. But
no. But his freshman mistakes going through his progressions that if that's a guy that's got a more experience, maybe it's next year at this time or 2 years from now at this time, he's probably got a little bit more patience in the pocket to go through his progressions while also showing urgency, like in situational football, like the 2-minute situation. I thought that there were some misreads that cost us ultimately. Like, Ja'Cory Barney popped open late on another play as well. And if he can stand in there and trust his pass protection that it's doing its job, we could have really, made some bigger plays happen. Maybe that leads to extending drives, scoring some points, executing in the red zone.
There was, I want to talk about missed opportunities on offense. There were, I think, equal dropped passes as there were off-target passes, but they were in big spots. I think the biggest one that comes to mind is late in the game to Isaiah Nayor that hands and chest and then ground, right? But there were a few where Dylan just had a little too much on it, just let him a little too much. That happens, I think, to quarterbacks at all levels, but big time, big moments, I know he wants to have those back. I'm not going to really dogpile on him too much about it, but I wish we had some of those back.
He missed probably about 5.
I would say 5. There was another play that he hit to Carter Nelson for like a 4-yard gain that I think Banks might have been shielded out of his field of vision because it could have been a first down on that. And instead we were punting as well there.
I'll say this: he looked. I mean, I don't know if it's the Dana Holgorsen effect, and I don't know how long the Dana Holgorsen effect stays in Lincoln, because we don't know what the offseason is going to bring. But Dylan has looked better. He's looked less timid, I think, the last couple of games. Some of the passes. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
I was just gonna continue on that thought. I was gonna interject. Like, I like that this is where this conversation is going. The play calling, the sequencing is really giving him an opportunity to show what he can do when there's not defenders defending certain concepts, knowing what's coming because we're so predictable.
I don't mind the on the run, the kind of 45-degree angle passes. He had some of those on Friday night. The pass that he had to Jamal Banks, that Jamal had to kind of climb the ladder up against the sideline and catch, and that was, I believe, in a third down situation.
On the very first drive, yeah.
Right. Those are good plays. And it's I don't want to say it's a I don't want to drop. I'm not the right metaphors escaping my mind, but it's a little bit of what Dylan Raiola is going to be able to do for us, going forward. We didn't get that in that gap of, 4 straight losses. So I'm excited about, him having, hopefully, like I said, more time with Holgorsen, not knowing that situation, and more time with better receivers. I think, Banks, I didn't realize this, and maybe it's because the ball was spread out so evenly, or maybe so, I don't know. I didn't realize that Jamal Banks was our leading receiver this season.
How many yards do you have?
And, it didn't seem like that many, like 600 maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's just that, I think, where Nebraska really needs, and maybe the guys in the locker room right now, we just don't know it yet, but we need a dude. We need a dude receiver who you can just count on to get the ball every time.
Yeah, you need to go find like a Stanley Morgan.
Yeah, that's a great comparison.
Guys like that. I would even say I would sell for a Samari Toure or a Trey Palmer at this point. Somebody
love to have a Quincy Enunwa.
Yeah, Quincy Enunwa, Kenny Bell. I mean, if this is just going to turn into a podcast of guys sitting around their living rooms talking about naming old players, I'm all here for it.
All right,
we're drinking some beers anyways.
I'm gonna go with my number one,
Nate Swift.
I was going to say, does Nate Swift have a COVID year?
Todd Peterson. Now here's a guy.
No.
We don't talk about Terrence Nunn.
I was going to bring Haas knows that I actually was a big Terrence Nunn guy growing up.
He was a good player. It's just, man. Yeah. 06 Texas.
So let's
one thing I want to say about the offense, to kind of finish up that thought that I had earlier. When you have a coordinator that has done it at a very high level for a long time, it's amazing how the game plans on tape just like jump out to you. Like right away, you're starting to notice trends. You can see what they're trying to attack, whether it's in the structure of the defense, the post-snap assignments of the defense, or, individual matchups, athletes on athletes. With Marcus Satterfield, I always want to say Scott Satterfield just because the Cincinnati head coach. That's where my mind defaults. It was hard to watch his games and really be able to discern what the game plan was. But with Dana Holgorsen, it's really easy. We're running mesh early in the game, 2 crossing routes coming together, shallow crossing routes. And on the backside of it, we're running a flat route with Emmett, and then we're running a corner route with the X receiver. So we're trying to force a high-low read on the backside cornerback, making in Iowa's cover 2 defense, making those corners come up to make the tackle or sink back to cover the corner route. And so we were really trying to put them in conflict, and then we were doing that in the run game too, forcing with wide zone or duo on the edge, forcing their corners to have to come up in one-on-one situations to tackle our running backs. And we popped a few against them. Also a testament to those DBs under Phil Parker. They don't mind coming up and sticking their nose in run support. So, I thought the game plan was really solid. I thought the sequencing of play calling was really good as well. There were only a few play calls that I really kind of left scratching my head. The end around to Carter Nelson in the second half was curious at best. I kind of found that his usage overall in the second half to be a little bit head scratching, just from the standpoint of that's not a guy that's played all that much this year. And then in the second half of the biggest game of the year, because let's face it, it's Nebraska, Iowa. Like, Iowa fans always wanted our attention. Well, you got it. You're our rival. But, we're using him in those situations I don't like. There was the quick screen to Barney that I didn't care for. I really liked the use of the run game late in the fourth quarter with Emmett Johnson. And then we set it up beautifully to hit Isaiah Nair on that play action that, as other people mentioned in the chat, he wasn't a drop. A drop has to touch your hands. It was just a complete whiff. And from my vantage point in the stadium, because that happened right in front of me, my seats were around about the 40, it was a touchdown. It was an absolute touchdown. He had Banks, that would have been able to block for him after the reception. And we're probably having a lot happier of a conversation right now. So that was about the only gripe I had with, anything offensive game plan or play calling related. The use of Carter Nelson and that end around and that quick screen being mixed in there. All in all, I thought that the timing of bringing Harburg in was phenomenal as well. It's just a shame he wasn't able to set his feet, or else that would have been first and goal inside the 5.
I like letting him throw.
Yeah. He looked that deep ball, first time we've seen it all year, really a lot more improved.
Yes.
It was a year ago.
You can throw the ball.
Limited sample size, but yeah.
Yeah, James Boardman echoed what you said, and it took me a minute to find it in the chat here, but said Nayor didn't drop the ball. You need to touch it for it to be considered a drop. It was a whiff. Yeah. And right above that, Minnie gifted 10 Corn Nation memberships. So we thank you, Minnie, for your generosity. And of course, since she's the co-host on the 5 Heart podcast and is also there on Monday Night Therapy, it's a little self-serving, but I've gifted Corn Nation memberships as well. So thank you, Minnie. And let's see, we got some comments in here about fear, and if I can find the right ones. Do y'all remember the movie Coach Carter?
Yes, that movie.
Pitt Snipe Husker quoting that, our greatest fear is not that we are weak, is that we are all powerful. I know that's a paraphrasing, or I think it's we are more powerful than we can ever imagine, or something, but and then there was here we go. Blaine Cole says Hoss, and we'll throw out to both of you. We'll start with you, Jake. Everyone knows about the fear of losing. What about the fear of winning?
This occurred to me actually today. I was thinking about the whole concept of the chasing 3 thing. And I know we need to win close games. A lot of games in the Big Ten are going to be close games, but how about just going out and kicking ass? How about not chasing 3? How about beating your opponent by fucking 30? I mean, I don't know. It seems like it seems like obviously Iowa, bring up Iowa, but I mean, that is who we just played. They know how to win. They just find a way to win, and it seems like we always find a way to lose. And I kind of had that feeling in the third quarter. I looked at my dad, and I kind of slumped over the bar over here, which no one can see. Obviously, I'm not going to show anybody, but I guys put my head down like, we're going to mess around and lose this game. Even though we kicked ass all the way up to this point, we're gonna find a way to lose it. And we need to. Obviously, everyone knows this. We need to find ways to win, and I don't know what the answer is. Besides going out and getting some really quality wins under our belt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It'd be curious, what point of the third quarter you're referencing when you said that to your dad, because in the stadium, I turned to my buddy Will, who I was with, and I told him, I was like, hey, I have a feeling we're going to fuck around and lose this game.
Same thing. Yeah, same exact thing.
Like those, you could kind of feel the ghosts of the past, so to speak, kind of start to seep back in. It's not those ghosts aren't anything supernatural. Those ghosts are the same doubt, that creeps in every time, that we try to we have a little bit of success. We can't handle it. And so I do think that there's a tendency for this program and this team to self-sabotage when things are going well. And I think it's more from a standpoint of not being able to handle success because they revert back to their past behavior. And past behavior is always the greatest predictor of future behavior. And so I think that culturally, this program, it's stuck in kind of a psychic rut, really. There's just a problem with its psyche, and that gets fixed by building some confidence. And you'd think at some point, sometime, somewhere along the line, that would get fixed by just going out there and winning a game, or being like, hey, we took Ohio State to the absolute limit. That should have been enough to come back the next week and nail UCLA's ass up to the wall, So it's one of those things where we got to figure it out. I think that we have a problem, though, handling success, just because we don't have that killer instinct right now to put somebody away by stepping on their throat.
That has been our problem for 10 years.
I'd say going back to probably the Solich era when things started going downhill. That's the thing, is like right now we struggle in these situations, the killer instinct, against teams that we perceive to be above us. And I'm kind of just projecting on what I think a little bit about how the roster views other teams. Iowa's a team that's kicked their ass for a lot of years. They're looking up, so to speak, at Iowa. Wisconsin is a team that's also kicked our ass for a lot of years, but they're down. And at this point, we're more talented than they are. And so we were able to take advantage of the blood that was in the water and put a team away like we were supposed to. But I just feel like we're having a problem, really getting over the hump. And a lot of that comes from, whether that's the coaching decisions, even though there weren't really any in this game that I disagreed with, or needing better players. So these games aren't even in doubt. A lot of that's what it really comes down to. What are the games that Iowa loses? It's to the teams that have better players.
Yes. And to that point, at halftime, remember I was talking to my dad. I'm like, man, I don't think we're not good enough to survive, 3-4 missed. I mean, just the bomb to Jalen Lloyd that was 5 yards overthrown. And I mean, if we would have gone up at half, up 3 scores, 17-0 or 21-3 or whatever, then I think obviously we win that game, because I think that the team has so much confidence. They're not going to sneak their way back in with that, call it what it is, pathetic offense that they have. Outside of one play, their quarterback was 7 of 14 for 33 yards, for crying out loud. We held one of the best players I believe one of the best players in the Big Ten.
I agree.
One of the best running backs, Caleb Johnson.
Second leading rusher in the country.
And not just because of attrition. The guy's a hell of a player. Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, and I don't know, since it happened since we've started this show, Caleb Johnson has declared for the draft.
You'll look good in a Chicago Bears uniform.
And I don't think he's going to go as high as he should. He'll drop a little bit, and he'll end up having a really good career in the NFL. He's a really good player. What did we hold him to, 49, 45?
I can actually tell you exactly what that was. Rushing, he was held to a net of 45, and then he has 73 yards receiving, obviously 72 of them coming on the touchdown.
Yeah, so if you go up by 3 scores in the first half, like it probably should have been, with proper execution, which we can sit here and say that all day. We could have said that for the last 10 years. With proper execution, we would be this record. We can say that till we're blue in the face. But the reality is, if we would have gone up 3 scores like we should have been in the first half, we would have won that game.
I think if we would have had the opportunity to go up 17-0 on that drive in the third quarter, that Hull missed the field goal. 17-0, the game's put away. It's done at that point. Credit to Kirk Ferentz I think he probably was sensing that similar tide shifting right there. He calls the timeout. They adjust at that point. They adjusted the way they were defending some of our passing concepts. They took away stuff over the middle. And at that point, we weren't able to really, generate anything. That was on the drive, too, that Isaiah Nayor gets absolutely held by Iowa's DB, draws a pass interference penalty. But if that doesn't draw a pass interference penalty, it is a touchdown on the ball. And so, credit to them for sensing, when to stem the tide, because momentum shifts. I always love when, the analytics people in football say momentum's not real. And I think that just goes to show that they're a bunch of pencil neck geeks that never played sports or competed in anything. Momentum is a very real thing. And you felt like when they got a field goal, even though we held them to just a field goal on the punt debacle with Garcia Castaneda and Vincent Shavers, that was still a piece of them being able to impact the game via special teams and get on the board and get some positive momentum rolling. And so at that point, it's the same thing with that timeout. It stemmed the tide from us taking momentum back from them.
Let's talk about that drive, that missed field goal drive. Braska Rascal said here a couple minutes ago, after we missed the field goal, I had a bad feeling we might lose. And before we talk about that play specifically, Minnie does follow up and says that was the moment for me, or for her as well. I watched that play, obviously. The play clock was winding down. It was a bad snap, and so the hold wasn't great. Hoss, when you rewatched the game last night, was there anything else? I mean, did it just look like everything was rushed? I mean, I feel like maybe the thing to do at that moment would have called a quick timeout if you were running out of time, rather than just have what we got, which is a horrible field goal attempt.
Yeah, I didn't think, looking at it live in the stadium, I didn't think that I could really get a good grasp on what happened. And then when I rewatched it, it looked like it was a snap that skipped across the turf a little bit, but the holder still got it down. That probably affected Hull's, walk up to the ball to kick it. But also that wind was pretty bad. I know probably, the flags on the goalposts that they show on TV, they were just kind of swirling. Mm-hmm. But from where he was kicking on the left hash, that wind was going from right to left. And I mean, those flags at the top of the stadium, they were fully extended. And so that wind probably caught the ball as well. I think that on a night that it probably isn't quite as windy, it has a little bit more of a shot to go in. But I think regardless, it was just a bad kick. It was always going wide left. But I think that the TV didn't really do it justice on how poor the conditions were in Iowa City. Like when I rewatched it, like you really couldn't tell like how cold it actually was.
Let's see. I want to talk about, so we talked about the missed field goal. I do want to talk about the punt situation. Minnie says, what about Isaiah Garcia Castaneda losing the ball? Every replay, I don't know why, and maybe I was texting you about this, Hoss, like because they didn't call anything, we couldn't try to challenge or ask for a review, but nobody touched that ball until Iowa touched that ball. But
I think they got the call right when I rewatched it. I do. I think that Shavers did beat him to touching the football. And I think it was more of a case of Shavers didn't realize that Garcia Castaneda never touched it. And so, when the ball continued to bounce, I think he thought somebody touched it. He was diving for it to field it. And we just, it was kind of a miscommunication, kind of one of those fluky freak things that happened. And also, I think he had a problem fielding it because of, again, the wind. I think it got caught up there because my vantage point that happened in front of me, it just kind of swirled around, as it was coming down.
A lot of this could have been avoided. To Mr. Matney's point, when are we going to actually return a punt?
A lot of people don't anymore in college football. Kind of a lost art.
It's kind of risky, isn't it?
Risky, and I just think coverage units have gotten so much better. But that being said, somebody needs to innovate in terms of punt return schemes and coaching punt return units, because as a third of the game, they could really affect, the game. You look at the revolutions that offenses have gone through. You look at the revolutions that defenses have gone through in terms of scheme. Having a great punt return unit could totally, allow somebody to turn around a program. And I mean, Nebraska for years had great return men. It's something that Tom Osborne emphasized. Dan Young coached holders, kickers, punters. The rest of the staff split it up with return men. And every year we were able to affect the game with field position. And so I think that somebody needs to figure it out and go out there and start gaining yards in the punt return game.
Yep. I think we had a couple of chats in the or a couple of responses to Mr. Matney in the chats. Kenny says they don't block the gunners. Raji says when our blockers block, then our return guy can return a punt. So, Mike Corrigan says that would require blocking as well. So
I think just kind of spitballing here because I've never given it too much thought. I think one of the things that might have led to the decrease of punt returns is the advent of the rugby punt. And when punters started rolling out and reading the end man on the line of scrimmage, or like this year we saw Bussini throw the fake punt to Jalen Lloyd because of how the Gunners were playing us. I think that them having to focus on whether the punter's going to punt it or keep it or where he's going to punt it to has really made it more difficult for return units to get to, at the snap, engage with the punt team, then disengage, run down, set up the wall on a punt return. Nobody's just standing there kicking right from the pocket anymore.
No.
Except for Bussini, slipping.
Yeah. All right, a lot of comments here. We've got a lot of comments going back to the beginning. I've tried to keep up. Aaron Keene says Nebraska is utterly bipolar. Talk about putting on a disaster class.
I agree.
I don't know. But from Wisconsin to Iowa, I didn't see there were times, yes, where it looked like two very different teams taking the field. I just don't know if I would make that comparison from Wisconsin to Iowa. Again, we talked about some of the numbers and how well the defense played, the opportunities that were missed. I don't know if I call that bipolar. Again, just
I would call it bipolar in terms of executing in situational football. It's easy to be confident and go out there and play, with your hair on fire when it's a team that you feel like you're capable of overpowering. Can you do the same when you really got to bow up, and take a few punches to the mouth and dish a few punches back to them?
Let's see. We're not going to address that. That's more of a Monday night comment than. Speaking of that, Blaine Cole says, Haas, how is Nebraska's mental state? Schizophrenic, bipolar, manic, depressive?
Honestly, I just kind of feel like Nebraska just doesn't have any referent self-efficacy. And all that is Albert Bandura talked about is the confidence to do or execute a task repeatedly based on past results. At some point, though, you have to go out there and you just have to go force it to the point of making it happen. You can't always just sit there and be like, well, I can't do this because I've never been good at it. That's loser talk. Mm-hmm. At some point, you have to go and do it. You have to fight, scratch, claw, do whatever you got to do to notch a win under your belt. Hardest thing to do is to go from 0 to 1. I think that's even a law of thermodynamics. 0 to 1 is the hardest thing to do because you have no momentum. Then from 1 to 2, it's a little bit easier. 2 to 3, so on and so forth. So I think that right now, I'd say we're probably depressive from getting our asses kicked for so many years. And those ghosts of the past behavior comes back to haunt us in crucial situations.
We're going to talk about that as well. But this is a fun one. It's not even a question, really, but John, a.k.a. Coronation, was in the chat a little bit and says, shouldn't some guy with a degree in educational psychology know this? Yeah, we got that answer. And then
no, I think it was in reference to what he said they should have the players, put on 94, 95 Nebraska games. And
here we go.
So they associate ass kicking with pleasure. Yeah, that and many point out that's like Pavlov's dog, but I'm pretty sure there ain't an institutional review board in the world that would approve this experiment, unlike the monster experiment at the University of Iowa that happened in 1939. Look it up. I'm not going to talk about it on air. Okay. Look it up if you're curious, but they probably should have lost their accreditation as an entire institution. And they are the reason, along with Nazi Germany, on why institutional review boards now exist for psychological experiments.
Okay. Yeah. Aren't they the program with all the recent scandals with recruiting tampering and strength and conditioning coach being like horrifically toxic and racist? I mean, they're really into this whole disrespect thing this week. Sitting on their high horse. I mean, they're a program with a lot of dirt on them lately, right? Yep. I don't know. I didn't see us rubbing their faces in it when that was going on, but maybe. I think it's interesting.
I would definitely, for them, they should fall down off that, or they should get off down that high horse before they fall off of it.
Blaine agrees with you, Haas. It's the difference from hoping the other guy doesn't execute to believing that you can execute.
Yep.
And this is what Iowa does well. Even though they were getting their asses kicked in the trenches and they were getting run all over, and up until a point, then they tightened up and our drive sputtered out. They never panicked and they never beat themselves. They believed they could win that game
all the way up to the end.
All the way up to the end. And what happened? They won it when we made mistakes. And that's what they do, and they do well. And I think that comes down to confidence, and I think comes down to leadership in your coaching. Not saying that Rule and staff are not good coaches. I think that it's just they have the advantage with Ferentz being there a long time and kind of the continuity of that and the established culture of Iowa football. But
I think, and I'm just going to warn everybody right here, this is the nicest thing you'll ever hear me say about the Iowa football program and Kirk Ferentz. If they weren't our rival, if we were in a totally different conference, if I was from Gretna, Florida instead of Gretna, Nebraska, real place, by the way, and I was a Florida State fan and just a general football guy, I would love the way that Kirk Ferentz coaches because they are well prepared for the reasons, Jake, you just described. That team had belief all the way up to the end. You never see them get their heads down. They're physical. They keep coming at you. They develop well. And it just sucks that they're our public enemy number one. And you see it and you're like, I can't even bring myself to really tip the hat all that much because I hate losing to these guys so much.
And think about, it's also not just maybe the players not hanging their heads or whatever. Think about the fan bases. I bet all across Iowa there was fans watching the game just like I was in Nebraska going, we're going to win this game. We're stopping them. And here we are. We have the lead. We're whooping their butts, and we're sitting here hanging our heads going, we're going to mess around and lose.
Yep.
We
fucked around and found out.
And we do every year.
Yep. And by an identical score to last year. And you let a player last year that gave us a lot of problems, Ethan Herkett, give you a lot of problems again this year. That was something that I thought that maybe we should have a little bit more of a game plan to control him in the passing game with his pass rush. But he gave us issues, and, that team is just well prepared. That's what they do. It's their preparation that's allowed them to take lesser talented guys and turn them into competitors with just about everyone in the conference.
And put winners in the NFL.
Yep. And an Iowa fan in the comment pointed out, that we have, or we don't have any, tight ends in the NFL, they have 4 tight ends in the NFL, and then said a joke that come on, man, really?
Yeah. Not even just to that one fan, but they're going to do their classless bragging that they do. Remember, guys that are Husker fans in the comment section, we're not Iowa. We're going to hold our heads up high in defeat.
I will say this, though. I think Iowa fans should receive the same treatment next year in Lincoln that Husker fans received in Iowa City this year.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, try to hold yourself with some class. It's I'm missing his name right now. Haas, the Bengals coach during the
Zach Taylor?
No, the Bottle Gate when he grabbed the mic and told the fans, or not Bottle Gate, the Snowball game when he said, "Hey, you're not in Cleveland. Quit throwing so," or whatever that was. Do you remember the name of that coach?
Is that Marvin Lewis?
No, it was way before then.
Sam Weish?
Mm-hmm. Weish. Underrated coach, but I just keep it. Yep, it was Weish. But just, and I may have had the name of the game wrong. But just and I'll always give credit there. Tight end, or Iowa's tight end U. And they put a lot of guys in the NFL, offensive linemen, tight ends, defensive players, not so much in the way of skill position players necessarily, but credit where it's due. They take kind of 3-star guys that are not highly recruited, and they develop them and they put them in the NFL. And these guys have long and successful careers with the best in the world. So that's the nicest thing I'll say about Iowa and their coaching staff as well. And I'll give them credit where it's due. 100%.
I hate losing to the guys, but I'm not, disingenuous or intellectually dishonest when it comes to discussing football. I'll give credit where credit's due. Just like when Rule was talking to Brian Ferentz over the offseason, that would have been nice to have Brian Ferentz come in to coach tight ends. He knows how to coach tight ends. Do I want him anywhere near coordinating an offense? No. But, That kind of development is something that Nebraska needs to get to. It's something that we did for a lot of years, bringing in top shelf talent with blending local talent, guys from the Midwestern region. So that's something that, I am a little bit envious of. I'm not envious of the way they play football, in terms of dragging people into rock fights and having shitty offenses, but I would love if we had well-coached players going out there executing Holgorsen's schemes and White's defense and, winning at a high level.
I'm going to take do my best to keep up with the live comments, and also I've got plenty of starred ones here. Aaron Keene says, early on, makes no difference in my opinion. A win is a win, and Nebraska snatched defeat from the jaws of victory.
We are quite good at that.
Very well said.
I think it was Carricker maybe that said, what is it? We lost that game in the most Nebraska way possible, right? But that is, yeah. CH Copeland 388 says, I don't hate Nebraska. I just laugh so hard when their fan base is so delusional that they think they're going to bring back the 90s and it's the same shit, different toilet. Now, the reason I highlighted this one is because I said, and I think I said it to you, Haas, is there are two types of Nebraska fans, I think. Those who are still in the 90s and those who are kind of tired or equally as tired of hearing about the 90s as non-Nebraska fans. Now, I might get some shit. I might catch some hate for that. But admittedly, this is not a secret. Anybody who's been watching Corn Nation for any amount of time knows that I didn't become a Nebraska fan until like 2006. So I wasn't around for the 90s. And, I love hearing memories and stories of the 90s. And that's different than having the expectation that we're going to rip off 38 wins in a row. So there are different ways of approaching the 90s. I don't know. This is clearly not a Nebraska fan here. I'm not a delusional Nebraska fan. I don't think you guys are. And I don't think most of the people who are here, as the filthy animals, are delusional to that extent. I just think that it's, I kind of break up Nebraska fans generally into the people who are still living in the past and the people who are kind of ready to stop hearing about the past. Hoss, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree 100% with you. And I think that there's a lot of things, like some of the students rushing the field when we beat Colorado, some of them rushing the field when we beat Wisconsin. You get now look, we've fallen this far. We used to rush the field, when we beat Oklahoma. We used to do these, get together at 72nd and Dodge when we won national championships. To those people who are under the age of, let's say, 45, and that might be a little bit generous, there's an entire almost 2 generations of Husker fans that haven't been there before. I mean, for crying out loud, like, Nebraska football is not frozen in time. We are not, we're still regarded as a blue blood program, but we're not, still winning at the level that we were in 1995, 1999. So you kind of have to become a new program again, and that's okay. Oklahoma did it. Oklahoma did it after 2000. Alabama did it after 2009. James Boardman, you want to live in the past? Do you be a get off my lawn guy? I'm a proud get off my lawn guy.
I had to almost did a spit take because I was taking a drink of my water when I read that. Thanks, James, for the laugh.
But it's frustrating because you even see some younger fans, and I think, Jake, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say this, that they show up for games wearing their dad's starter jackets from the 90s. We're just on an anti-starter jacket, sentiment here on this show. And, they want to talk, they want to wear the vintage Nebraska gear from the 90s. They want to, talk about bringing the option back and things like that. And it's to the point where it's like, let's just go out there and let's fucking win in whatever year it's in. Not wanting to do it a certain way that we did in 1999. Not wanting it to, play defense just like we did in 1994. Go out there and win in the modern game, because the Nebraska way, that standard of excellence that we achieved in the 90s, was about being on the cutting edge. schematically, tweaking schemes, being on the cutting edge of player development, strength and conditioning, and then just teaching and coaching players better than your opponent did. That's what the Nebraska way is. And I'm to the point where it's like anybody who wants to short circuit the process, this is where I'm going to invoke a little bit of Bo Pelini, trust the process every day, that incremental improvement of getting a little bit better every time. Anyone who wants to short circuit that and think that we could, like under Mike Riley, recruit all these receivers and be this, high flying passing offense, you're overlooking the one thing, that's developing in the trenches, developing inside out. That's, when I talk about the 90s, that's what I'm talking about. Development. Not just the 90s were great because Nebraska's great. No, the 90s were great because we put in all the work to get there. And that's a part of why we're so wayward as a program.
Yeah, and I think that there's some kind of misunderstanding from outside fan bases on what being delusional is and what being proud of your program's history is. Gorgamel mentioned a few minutes ago that we still have championship history. And it's okay to be proud of that. But what Haas was mentioning about wanting to bring the option back and thinking that football is different than it was in the 90s and the 2000s. It's different now. We have a 12-team playoff. I mean, it's just a much different game. Now, that being said, I think it's perfectly fine to be proud of your program's history, and Nebraska has a proud history. Iowa, you can be proud of your team's history. I mean, you've won more than half your games. You have like slightly over a 500 winning percentage, and I don't know, no national championships, and maybe a handful of conference championships. I'm not sure. I haven't really looked into your program's history. I don't think very many people have. But that being said, I think that you still have every right to be proud of it and be proud of your program's history. So I think there's a difference there. And there are two types of Husker fans. There are delusional fans that think it can be like that. It's never going to be like that again. So with that being said, I'll defend being proud of it and reminiscing about it in a positive, happy, upbeat way. Reminiscing about the program and the success that we've had in the past without imparting that on anything we're doing today.
Marianne Roberts with an interesting one here says, I lived through the 90s and loved those teams, but it seems the players nowadays are soft and don't want to hit or get hit. Their talent don't mean shit if you don't have the killer mentality.
I suspect there was maybe some pharmaceutical grade AIDS some of those 90s players with their killer mentality had. There seemed to be a lot more hair loss in early 20s Husker players and a little more gynecomastia. I don't think testing was as rigorous back then.
I do think, too, I think that players are still the same as they've always been. I think it's more of a case of what the game's evolved into in terms of rules that have changed a lot of things.
And, of course, that was all. I'm just joking around.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mr. Rostovsky says, we still haven't seen a shot of Raiola not being on that ball at the very end. And you never will.
Well, let me put it this way. Iowa, horrible job of showing any replay inside the stadium that doesn't, aid them.
Well, naturally. Let's see. Mr. Mattney says, when we're dominating a team like we were, and we'll start with you, Jake, why not go for it on fourth down more? Why did we play so timidly?
I don't know. I don't know if it was a case of playing timidly or if it was just situational football with the weather, the cold, the risk versus reward. I mean, shit, we saw Ferentz make the decision to punt on 4th and a foot, got booed by his own crowd, and it didn't end up affecting the outcome of the game. So I think it's easy to sit here and try to analyze that. And Haas knows this, Greg. We haven't watched the game together, obviously. I always err on the side of aggression. I do. I always think that because as many times as you're going to convert based on the averages, those 4th downs, it'll make up for the loss in field position on times you don't make it. So to take a little bit of the revenge of the nerds stance on this with analytics, I do believe in going for it more often than a lot of coaches do. In this particular game with how our defense was playing then again, though, you could spin it the other way and say how our defense was playing. We should have been more aggressive and go for it. So I think you can fit the narrative either way that you want to, based on how you want to spin it. But I don't know. I don't really have a problem with not being more aggressive, Dave, personally. But then again, we can't go back and see what would have changed if we would have converted some of those, and maybe we would have won the game.
I think it was the right call not to punt in this game, because I think in a game against an opponent that's going to play so soundly in situational football, you have to be sound too. You can't give them short fields. You have to make them drive and earn every possible yard. And by and large, you're going up against a team that's giving you a lot of problems in short yardage in the run game. Especially in that second half, they were starting to get some pretty good penetration on the front side of wide zone and duo. And I just think that in the cold, you pay attention to how the game's unfolding. And I'm with Jake. Be aggressive. Go out there, get your best call, try to pick it up. But you can't just be default aggressive. That can't just be your default setting. You have to really be in tune to how the game's unfolding. That's what situational football comes down to.
Let's jump back into some of the start comments here. Fred said early on, Iowa football is 10 minutes at best, strictly missionary and nothing else.
Yeah, they're a starfish team for sure.
And a couple that have to do with the roster, because TSD says 105-man roster, get down to brass tacks. And Sam Matney follows it up with how many guys transfer before and after the bowl game. I mean, we know that there's going to be attrition. We have to get down to these new roster limitations of the guys who will still have eligibility after this season. And maybe this is an unfair question, put you all on the spot, but who do you think is going to be asked to future endeavor?
I don't even know who all that group of guys is, to be honest with you. Yeah. I haven't really looked at it much.
I'd have to say
Jamari Butler's coming back.
So is Marquise Buford.
Which I like both those guys. I think they should have roster spots. Both guys, I think, are really good players. Buford is a very physical defensive back when it comes to making tackles, and I like the way the guy plays. I'd love to have him back, and Jamari as well.
I would love to be able to put him at safety instead of corner.
I agree.
I like what Vince Watson mentioned. Your roster's at 104. What position are you blowing your NIL on?
Just started that to bring it up later, but let's go.
Offensive tackle and wide receiver.
Yeah.
And running back. And I do like Parker, the commit from St. Louis. That is a solid running back. I really also like what Connor Booth could potentially bring to the table as kind of a Swiss Army knife weapon out of Wahoo Newman. But I think you got to try to go find, the unicorn 5-tool running back that can do it all. And I think that you need to go find receivers and offensive tackles.
But I think
I'll be honest, I think Teddy Prohaska is a guy that they should probably let walk, in the roster pair down, because that's a guy that he hasn't been able to stay healthy. And when healthy, he was getting pushed by Turner Corcoran for the starting job.
I almost feel like Teddy might be in a unique situation because of his injury history, that they could, we'll honor. I don't know how they do this with the roster. Like, we'll let you stay here and finish out your degree. We'll honor that scholarship. But as far as, the seeing the field anymore, that's probably done, because they've done that with players in the past. So I just don't know how that works with the new roster.
You can medically retire.
That's what I mean. But I think to Vince's point, and Jake, you have one spot left on your roster. You got all this nil money. What position are you throwing it at?
Tackle. It's not even close, in my opinion. Not even close. Running back, I think we got a really good, solid starter in Emmett Johnson, Dowdell. This all assuming that these guys we're going to have transfers, but I like the Dowdell, Emmett Johnson combination there. I think running back is good with fresh talent coming in. Wide receiver is the only one I could see you could make an argument over tackle, but we have we're flipping the OU commit, Cortez Mills. I don't have any inside information. I should make that clear. But based on what I've seen, the Twitter experts, that looks like that's probably a done deal. I think Michael Terry is probably leaning Nebraska. Again, I don't know that for sure. That'd be by far our highest rated commit in this class if we get him. He's a 5-star athlete. But I think it's not even close. I think you have to go after a tackle with your one roster spot left.
This might piss off some grandmas out there, but Pitt says at 10-13, I think Fedoni gets shown the door in one manner or another.
It breaks my heart to say it. It's one of the most obvious solutions on that offensive side of the ball. And it does. It twists the knife because of how much I like him.
Yeah.
But it just makes sense.
Could he?
It depends. It depends. Because if Borkacher is a guy, he walked at senior day. If he leaves, Fedoni probably needs to stay. And I'm not somebody that really is all that in love with the skill set that Fedoni's shown through his time at Nebraska. And I get that he's been kind of Matt Harrion by injuries. But I think that he probably ends up staying just because of how thin that room suddenly is.
I'm going to trademark that term, Matt Harrion, so you have to pay me a royalty like 10 cents every time you use it.
Yeah.
But
get a big set up on that bar.
Yeah,
if
Borkacher isn't coming back, would we still have Bonner, Carter Nelson, possibly Fedoni?
Bonner and Nelson are more of a big H receiver in an offense. You're going to still need to have an inline tight end.
All right. I don't want to, not to say waste time. It's an important topic. We got a whole off season. We don't know, I got to do math. 76 minutes into this. Vince says, hope Minnie is stalking the long snapper for next season. That did help bring Dylan Raiola to Lincoln.
We'll find one, Minnie.
Yeah,
I would love to hear Lofton, as Aaron Rostovsky pointed out, about 50-50 between FSU and Nebraska.
Yeah, Minnie, your mission, should you choose to accept it, go find us a long snapper. So let's see. Marianne Roberts said earlier, not impressed with Nayor. And to kind of follow that up, I don't want to necessarily dig on the guy, but Mr. Matney, David, Sam's in here too. So living in Omaha, David Matney, the official realtor of the 5 Heart Podcast, says, do we have any concerns with player evaluation when it comes to like Jeff Sims, Isaiah Nair, etc.?
It looks that way to me. Again, not to pile on, but these guys are getting paid. I mean, the reality is they're professionals. I mean, Isaiah Nayor probably makes more than double what my salary is as a professional, what I do. So, then again, I don't know. Jeff Sims was a bad miss. Nayor hasn't shown it, but we've also had a few hits. Like, I would consider Jamal Banks a relative hit.
No, him, Billy Kemp.
Yeah, I mean, Billy Kemp was a pretty good hit. So you can go either way. You can
Dowdell,
I think, was a big hit. So you kind of, I don't know, it's hard to balance it. But Nayor was my knee-jerk emotional reaction is that we have a problem. That's why I answered it that way so quick. But kind of thinking my thoughts through as I talk, which you shouldn't do. You should think before you speak. But
what?
Hard to do in a live show.
I know. It's hard to weigh it because I go this way, then I kind of go this way. And Nayor, but the thing is, about player evaluations, who wouldn't have wanted that guy?
Yeah.
Honestly, who wouldn't have wanted that guy? He's a track star. He's got great size. He has all the measurables. I mean, he seemed like a really good player in the portal. So I don't know. I don't know who you put that on besides him.
I think as well, maybe the staff doesn't have a talent evaluation problem with the portal, but what I think they might have is I think they might be looking at potential a little bit too much over production.
That's a really good point.
And I think that they need to be honest with themselves and say, can this guy play? And it's one thing if it's a guy with limited opportunities like a Dante Dowdell coming in from Oregon. I would say Dowdell is a hit as well. I thought that he began to play really well as the year went on. But with like Nayor, yeah, he was at Wyoming. Then he went to Texas, and he's got the speed. Was that maybe a little bit of potential overproduction? Because if a guy hasn't done it before. What makes them think that transitioning to a new program, moving to a new place, new program, new coaches, teammates, new way of doing things, new offense is going to be what he needs?
Because here's what you don't want to have happen, Haas. You don't want to turn into the Oakland Raiders of college football,
exactly.
where you're drafting the guy with track speed, all the measurables, but you're not asking who cares? Darius Hayward-Bay. If I'm not mistaken, the Raiders drafted him in the top 10 out of Maryland because he ran a 4.240. The guy really wasn't, I'll call it a Husker, Fabian Washington, 27th overall.
I'll also say this. I think that Rule kind of became a little bit like an Al Davis over this first year where he talked about measurables so much. And he talked about the desire to play positionless football. And
yes.
He talked about guys, being able to go in at any position, like in the receiving core. And then Dana Holgorsen is a guy that he believed in always having receivers just rep the same position over and over again. And maybe having a couple of guys go out and learn, multiple positions, the X, Y, Z, H positions. But he talked about, getting good at one thing. And so I kind of think that this staff fell in love with the opportunity to be like, hey, this guy's got these measurables. He could play this position. He could also learn this position. We can just have this San Francisco 49ers offense where Kyle Juszczyk's at fullback on one play and he's out catching wheel routes from a receiver spot at the other. And I just don't think that's a really good recipe for success in college football where you have constraints on practice time. It's not like the NFL where you have guys, they're doing that for a living. And so like Gorgamel points out, Rule said Sims is an NFL quarterback. By all accounts, measurable wise, he is. 6'3", 220 pounds, strong arm, mobile. But the one area that he's not good at is actually playing quarterback.
Yeah, put him in put him in a t-shirt and shorts and let him do drills. He's going to wow you. Put him in the game, and the moment looked just a little too the lights just looked a little too bright for Sims here in Nebraska is what it looked like to me. So, and
then by the end of it, he was psychologically broken. And to play quarterback, you got to be a tough dude. You got to be mentally tough. You got to be physically tough. And Sims was broken from the time that Minnesota game, right after that Minnesota game was over. He never had a chance.
No,
the 2023 season was dead basically from the minute it began. And credit Rule for salvaging it to win 5 games.
Yeah.
Let's look a few more of these. Charles Hewlett says, start the season strong, finish the season weak, just like the game, score in the first half, not score in the second half. I mean, we had plenty of game times where we had a crap-ass first half and scored in the second half. So I will say this, that some of the games were kind of a microcosm for the season, the larger scope in that, there were times when we were not there. And whether it was a half or a whole game, if you want to, dredge up the Indiana massacre, there were just times where we had 11 guys on the field, but ain't nothing going on between the ears, at times. So, I don't necessarily disagree with this. I just think that it wasn't. I don't know. Now let's move on to Vince says we got coaching. Vince says more likely to not be here next year, Tony White or Dana Holgorsen.
Tony White.
Yeah, I agree.
Just because, people know what Dana Holgorsen can do. I feel like if he wanted to take offers, he could take offers. But we talked about
nobody came calling for him within the first year.
Right. That's kind of a sign. That's an indicator.
Yep.
I don't know. Dana's kind of a goofy. I don't know. I feel like he likes the challenge, and I feel like he likes having a talent like Dylan Raiola at quarterback. And I think this is a fun game for him, and he has fun being an offensive coordinator. I think the prospect of him staying around looks good. I think the prospect of Tony White sticking around looks pretty good right now too. Who's more likely? I think more likely to not be here would be Tony White.
I'd keep an eye on a West Coast head coaching position for Tony White that's been open for a while.
Got one in mind, or just?
Yeah, I got one in mind.
Not gonna say.
I mean, Fred just kind of led with it in the comments. He keep an eye on Fresno.
Okay. Yeah, Fred says Tony White going to Fresno State as head coach. Dana ain't interested in a head coaching gig. He enjoys the simplicity of offensive. Now that right there, the simplicity of offensive coordinator at a Big Ten school. I don't really know if there's anything simple about it, but I understand what you're saying. It's less
You have to deal with
management.
Creative bullshit.
Yeah. Like, I think he just loves the game. He just loves the
Football guy.
Yeah, he's a football guy. He loves the concepts. He loves the challenge. And right now, I think that even though Dylan has maybe not executed the way that I thought he was going to, and a lot of us probably thought he was going to this season, he's still an elite talent. And he's shown flashes. I think this is fun for Holgorsen to have a weapon like that at quarterback and a guy that you don't have to – you can – every play in your playbook – you can run. You don't have to cut the top 10% off because you have a guy who can't make the throws. You got a guy that can make every throw on the field. And that's fun if you're an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think the last time that he had a guy like that as well, he was calling plays was probably Will Grier at West Virginia. And Will Grier had a huge arm.
Yeah, Will Grier had a huge arm and he threw the deep ball really well. But I think one thing I'd like to see more from Dylan, like we saw with Wisconsin, was actually throwing the ball on the line with some mustard on it. Mm-hmm. You know, he did a little bit against Iowa. I think the temperature might have been messing with him a bit. One thing, I don't know, this sounds like a really weird thing to point out, but I don't know. I think it might be harder for Dylan sometimes to like spin the ball because I don't think he has very big hands. I know it sounds like a weird thing, like an NFL GM. I don't know his measurables, but one guy, like this is somebody, I don't know if anyone's going to really know what I'm talking about, but Tyler Bray. I don't know if Haas, if you remember, or Greg, you guys remember Tyler Bray at Tennessee.
Back up on the Chiefs.
Yep, for years. And played. He was a Bear for a while. Tyler Bray had elite arm talent. And I think Dylan Raiola, to be fair, way more talent than Tyler Bray. But Tyler Bray had a little bit of a problem sometimes putting the ball on the line because I don't think he could spin it very well because he had small hands. Not that we're going to get into this conversation about hand size at the quarterback position. But also another thing that comes along with having small hands is fumbling. And we have seen Dylan have issues with holding on to the ball. So, like I said, I don't know. Maybe he is – I don't know. I haven't noticed. Maybe he has huge hands and I'm just out of pocket here. I don't know. I don't have a measurable in his hands to pull up right now. But I don't know. Greg, you look pretty big hands. So,
yeah, let's say about guys with big hands.
Big feet.
They can throw
big gloves.
They can throw the shit out of the football.
I throw a baseball better, but yeah.
I think somebody pointed out the discord between Rule and Tony White. I've heard the rumors as well about everything that's been going on. With differences in scheme and philosophy, and Rule wanting to go to more of a match quarters scheme, and we've talked about on the show like Iowa does. I think there is some truth to wanting to move on from the 3-3-5. I think out of 18 teams in the conference, we were the only one to run it. I like the disruption of the 3-3-5, but I think that the style of play in this conference makes it difficult to really have it going at the full capabilities that it has. I don't think you're really going to see somebody come in and really be like, hey, I run a 4-3, I run a 3-4, I run a 3-3-5, because anymore, every defense is so hybridized that a 4-3 can fit like a 3-4 and a 3-3-5 can fit like a 4-3. I think you'll see an outside hire occur. I don't think it'll be John Butler like everybody says.
So we have, I don't know the accuracy, although I don't doubt it. Aaron Keene says, Minnie, we need Dylan's hand measurements stat. And Minnie says 7 3/4 inches, I think. Whether or not that's true, just the fact that she may have that number is also why.
Yeah, they said Joe Burrow had small hands at the combine with 9.1. I mean, 7.75. Those some just little claws.
I had to look it up because I'm the one that brought up this stupid conversation. He has 9.5-inch hands. According to his scout report, he should not have any issues with ball security and control. However, it could impact some, scouting at the next level. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws here. It's just something that I don't know. It's just something that I've heard, NFL scouts before mention that some guys with a big arm, they're a little bit limited with their ability to put the ball on the line because it's harder for them to spin it with as many RPMs because their hands are just a little smaller. It's just like in baseball, which was my primary sport. If you have a bigger hand, your hand is bigger, you can spin a curve easier because your fingers literally can wrap around the ball more. You have smaller hands. So, yeah.
I
said, yes, Fred, I said ball security. Yeah.
Well, but just the fact that she put the number out there, that's why Dave Matney says, Minnie, go find us a long snapper. Yeah. Fred says, Minnie's already camped out at Red Lobster. And then Minnie says, I'm on it, guys. # long snappers are people too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's change topics. We need to turn the end of this already very long show into a conversation about the hand size of quarterback prospects.
Yeah. To quote Bryant or Greg Gumbel, let's move on.
Yeah.
Zero says Ohio State 7-2 in conference. 4 Big Ten teams get taken. We need to win 4 more conference games a year. We played 6 games within 1 score. How do we win 4 of those 5 1-score losses?
Better players.
Yeah.
More. So that's the Jimmys and Joes, not an X's and O's.
Again, I'm just going to use Iowa as an example. I didn't have any issue with any coaching decision in the Iowa game. It came down to 3 plays where we didn't execute.
Mm-hmm.
If we had a better offensive tackle, Dylan maybe isn't in that situation on the strip sack. If we had guys with better closing speed in the secondary, we get Caleb Johnson on the ground on the swing pass. Things like that. So I feel like if we can improve and upgrade at some positions in terms of overall talent and athleticism, and then if we can also troubleshoot the areas that, we did have some shortcomings in other games, the inability to execute in short yardage against Ohio State on the 1-yard line, on the 4th and goal, or, trusting your O-line to pick up 3 yards against Illinois on 3rd and 3, or what was the other game? UCLA, those 2. If you have the opportunities to, affect the passer against UCLA, if you have the opportunities to block better up front against USC and execute in certain situations, or Dylan checks it, to where the receiver needs to go, all those things just add up over time. And those are good examples of putting players in the right position, but needing to have the players to go out there and execute it. And I'm not absolving this staff of everything that they've done, saying that, hey, it's not their fault, because there's moments this year that's very much their fault. Indiana, that was a feckless, ineffectual football team that day. Yeah. That was fucking embarrassing. But I think by and large, this staff, the good outweighs the bad. I like a lot of the development they have had so far through 2 years. But we need to upgrade talent just like everybody else does.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's see. Fred, and I like that he puts a disclaimer, serious comment. Fred says, serious comment, I feel like Holgorsen could be Rule's McBride, a.k.a. Fire and Brimstone, dickhead firebrand.
Yep. I think Rule needs that, because I think Rule, and I'm sure Zero will appreciate this, admonishment of Rule, but I think he's a little bit of a nice guy in terms of how he wants to go about things. And I think that that's okay if you want to be the CEO of the program and you want to be, a little bit more of the good cop. That's fine, but you got to have ass kickers on staff if that's the stance you're going to take.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know what it is about Dana Holgorsen. I just like him. I like him in his press conferences. He's got a very dynamic personality. I think he can really relate to the players well. He just hasn't been here very long. How long has he been here? 3 weeks? Three and a half weeks? Something like that? I mean, I think that it'd be a huge get to get him to stay, honestly. And so far, schematically, from what I can tell, again, I'm not the X's and Haas kills me when it comes to X's and O's analysis, not even close. But, and you may disagree with me, and if you do, Haas, that's cool. But from what I've seen schematically, based on what I've seen on TV, looks pretty dialed into me. I mean, I really don't take any issue with what I'm seeing from us. Very little. And not that I'm an expert, obviously. Dana Holgorsen knows a million times more than I do. But with Satterfield, there were times I'm like, really? Why? Mm-hmm. I think confidence exudes from Dana Holgorsen, where with Marcus Satterfield, it looked like there was some doubt that had crept in, especially toward the midpoint of the season.
I agree. He was lost. He was in over his head. And Dana, his play calling makes sense. When you even on plays that we don't quite execute. Through 3 games now, I'm sitting there. I'm not like, God, really? That's what we went with there?
See, and now it doesn't seem like it's play calling or schematics. Execution seems to be the problem. Where before it seemed like maybe it was a little more schematic.
Yep.
So now, I don't know. I think that
it's amazing how much better Ben Scott has looked when we have a coordinator calling the run game in ways that help out the center and guards, not have to deal with, stunts inside the A gaps.
Is Ben Scott a guy who gets drafted?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'd say probably 5th round.
I was going to say 5th round, probably. I mean, somewhere in there. Ty, I think, would be a 1st rounder if it wasn't the fact that he's just a little older. That might be the only thing that keeps him out of the 1st round. He still may sneak into the late 1st round.
Depends on how he tests. I think he'll test well.
I think he's going to test very well. But
let's see. I'm trying to figure out. Minnie said this earlier. We're all in this together, as Haas says. Incremental improvement. We are still going to a bowl game.
It is incremental improvement. I know 6-6 in a bowl does feel a little bit like a Pyrrhic victory, but at the same time, on paper, it's improvement. Next step, go out there and play. I think we're going to play, at least offensively. Defensively, I'll kind of hedge a little bit just because of a little bit of the uncertainty coming up. But if Dana's here, offensively, I think we're going to light it the fuck up in the bowl game.
And that brings to kind of 2 questions. Joe says, who is the bowl opponent? I don't think we know that yet.
Nope.
But Brett says, thoughts on what bowl games we are hearing we may go to and how we match up against prospective opponents. Is that all too premature? Like, I haven't heard any whispers or rumors or anything.
Yeah, I think it's way too premature at this point.
Let's see. One thing that Mr. Matney hopes for in the future is less of John's bathroom. He says there are way too many videos from John's bathroom this year, and none of them with the new shower curtain, which is just ridiculous. Going back to I think Friday night still, Minnie's still a little upset about it. She says, it's a stupid loss. We only needed to score more than 10 flipping points. It's tough to win games when you don't score more than 10 points. So Ken E says, I think what we all would really like is just a mean, ill-intentioned defensive end. And we've got the sack man and James Williams. I don't know if I would call him mean or ill-intentioned, but I like that he's pretty effective.
Yeah. Need a game record at that position.
Can he turn into that in the offseason, you think? Like, can there be some
not an every down guy, no.
Okay.
I think that Cameron Lenhart can develop into that.
And Princewell.
I think they both have all the physical tools and the talent to do so. I think they're just young guys.
I wouldn't be shocked if James, and this is not going off of any whispers or anything. I wouldn't be shocked if James Williams is an NIL casualty that some other school swoops in.
I guess the only reason I want to follow that up is I feel like he'd be one that I think they'd really like to preserve. Would he not?
I think so, but I think he'll have his fair share of suitors, just like Tommy Hill and Thomas Fedoni had last year too.
Juan with an interesting one here. Ryan Walters is looking for a new job, and Juan says, "Say we lose Tony White, how about Ryan Walters for defensive coordinator? He was great at Illinois."
His hatred for Nebraska, I would say he's going to have to outweigh how much he likes unemployment versus how much he hates Nebraska.
Mutual too. Don't want him.
And how big the paycheck would be, right? I mean, I think you can look the other way for a lot of things depending on the number of zeros. So,
Haas, you know my opinion. You know my opinion on Walters. Let's just hope. I don't want
Delta Bravo.
Yep.
Personally, I think if you're going to go with somebody that has Big Ten familiarity, you give Jim Leonard a call at who's out with the Denver Broncos.
Awesome.
Because he was from Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I think that he's going to be somebody that's probably going to want to coach against Wisconsin in the conference.
I think he would love
to have.
Yeah, I think that should be the number one call for Rule if Tony White leaves. Call him up, give him carte blanche to do whatever he needs to do.
100%.
Let's see. Couple here from Mr. Matney. One on the past and one looking to the future. In the past, what grade would you give Matt Rule on his clock and game management?
Honestly, I would give him, I'd give him an A. I have no problems with anything that he did in the Iowa game.
Is this on the season or is this in one game?
I'm going with I'll tell you this. Let's go season.
I'm trying to think. There was just so many times I remember throwing my hands up, but I can't think of any specific instances. I don't know. I guess I'll go with like a B-. Just that's the safe one, because I do know there were times I was like, "What the hell are we doing?" But I'm missing right now specifics.
Against Iowa or in general?
No, in general.
Just for the season.
Yeah. For the season.
For the season,
I'm probably more like a C+.
Yeah, I would say C, solid C.
Is there any specifics that you're and obviously Dave agrees with you? I mean, is there any specifics you can remember? Because I remember you and I watched games together where we were throwing our hands up and asking each other what was he thinking, but I can't think of any specifics.
Well, I would definitely think that there were instances like against UCLA, that tail end, when we took 9 fucking minutes to drive into the red zone.
For sure, that one.
Just that lack of urgency that we showed. And that goes back to the head coach, in terms of managing the overall game. I would say the USC game, there were a few moments in that, and I'm kind of drawing a blank on the big one that, showed up. Yep, thank you.
Wasted timeout and punting, 100%.
And then, you know what? I just thought of what I thought of in the stadium against Iowa. There was an opportunity that we had a 4th and 1, and we kind of waffled back and forth, and then we had to take a delay of game on it. And I didn't think, but I thought at the time, I was like, okay, Rule probably doesn't really know, what he wants to do there. And then sure enough, when I watched the replay, you see him going, that's on me, to the players, as they're coming off the field. So I would knock that down from an A in the Iowa game down to like, a B, B-.
All right. And real quick, looking ahead to next year, Mr. Matney wants to know, what do we define as minimum standard? We're at 6 wins. Now,
minimum standard is going to be replicating what we did this year.
And I don't think we can play this game anymore.
No, I don't think that we can sit there and go, oh, hey, we went 6-6 this year. We're going to go 8-4 next year. We're going to go 9-3. We're going to go 10-2. One, we're going to have a new defensive coordinator, and there's probably going to be members of that defensive staff that leave to go with Tony White wherever he goes. I think Terrence Knighton's probably one of them as well, to take that next step in his career trajectory. So with some of the uncertainties that are coming up, you lose Ben Scott, you lose Bryce Benhart, you lose, Teddy, Turner Corcoran, if they, are attrition losses as well. You're replacing a lot of guys at different areas. So I would say 6-6 has to be the minimum standard.
I hate hearing that, but I have to agree with you.
I think until we show that we can piece together success on a more consistent basis, that we have to accept that the minimum standard is pretty much the minimum requirement of respectability.
I'll say we need more incremental improvement. I'll say 7-5. I think you got to win. You can't plateau. You have to, even if the next level is one more regular season win, I think you have to get to that point. So that's where I would say 7-5 regular season. You also have to beat Iowa. Like, God dang, you can't lose to Iowa again. All right, last but not least, this will be the last comment we take. This was just recently submitted by our very own John Johnston. I'm absolutely shocked at how many people took that video I made about Matt Rule doing the walkthrough as a serious video. I don't know if you guys saw it, probably not. But it's a couple minute video. about Matt Rule's lap around Friday night that he, I guess, went through. Cut through some of Iowa's players, and hilarious video, and just the fact that people took that serious and didn't hear the sarcasm that was all throughout that. People on the internet sometimes are not as smart as we would hope they would be. So,
Sometimes.
guys, I reckon the next Coronation Overreaction is going to be after the bowl game, whenever that will be. So until then, I guess you got a few Sunday nights off till we figure out next steps. And I thank you guys for a tremendous season. It's been a lot of fun. Great hanging out with you, Jake, and getting to know you a little bit more. And Haas, of course, always great seeing you. So that'll wrap it up for the regular season of Coronation Overreaction. But we get to bring you a very special 13th edition with a bowl game here in a couple of weeks. We'll have all the details of that when we know who and when our bowl game will be. So for Jake, for Every Game Jake, it's great to see you, sir. For Haas Reuter, I'm Greg Mahochko. This is Coronation's Overreaction on Coronation's YouTube, Facebook, and X. And we'll see you next time. Go Big Red. Haas.
Hayden Fry was a bad coach.
Jake.
Same as last week. Fuck Iowa.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red. Thank you all for being the best fans in college football.
Just makes me tear up so much.
And thank God we don't sell Pizza Ranch at Memorial Stadium.
God.